Welcome to Movie Time in 5. My name is Brian Hayes, and each week I'll provide an almost 5-minute spoiler-free look at a horror or sci-fi movie recently released in theaters, on iTunes, or popular streaming services such as Netflix or Amazon Prime. This week I will be releasing 2 episodes, one of which is the video you are watching right now, in which we'll discuss The Nightmare, which is actually not a horror movie per se, but a supernatural psychological thriller documentary. It is currently streaming on Netflix at the time of this recording. So let's dive into The Nightmare. This documentary at its core explores the experiences of sleep paralysis, focused on not necessarily the scientific studies or information, but interviews with 8 individuals from around the globe who have had various experiences, but some with very common threads, whether they be supernatural, psychological, or a meeting of the two. This documentary was a look into the anecdotal evidence that continues to support the enigma that is sleep paralysis. The director does a stellar job in portraying the interviewees' belief in the significance of sleep paralysis through, in many cases, creepy, if not downright terrifying narratives of these recounted events. The way that some of the interviewees describe their entity or entities as consuming the substance of their fear is very powerful, and in many ways reminds me of how Pennywise is portrayed in the recently reimagined 2017 It movie. The fact that these portrayals through shadow people, red-eyed felines, and alien-looking entities often embody the person's greatest fear doesn't necessarily mean that it is purely psychological, but some supernatural element seems to be portrayed in this documentary as well. There isn't a focus on the how of sleep paralysis in regards to in-depth scientific studies, but provides detailed events to let the viewer, to a degree, form their own opinion. So, what does this movie do well? Well, first, the atmosphere and reenactment of the encounters with various entities are overall very good. There are some weak CGI in certain places, though. But it does provide the creepy and supernaturally terrifying effect that I believe that the documentary makers were going for. The interviewees did a good job communicating their stories and were very clear and concise. So that's a very good second element of what this movie does well. Interviewing people from around the world does lend more credibility to the narratives, whether they be psychological, spiritual, or again, a combination of the two, given there are some common experiences and threads between various cultures and people portrayed in the movie. So what does the documentary movie struggle with? Well, in certain sections of this documentary, there is a lack of cohesiveness with the, in my opinion, too often jumping between stories, which made it somewhat difficult to follow throughout. Also, second, there was a lack of any type of discussion in the science of sleep analysis in the movie. Knowing this movie was focused on the experiential side of sleep analysis, it is understandable, but given this is a documentary, having that side of the coin would have added to the overall goal of what a documentary should be, in my opinion, which is to learn more about the given subjects: why, what, where, when, and how. Also, the movie relied in some places on some cheap jump scares and low quality CGI that I felt cheapened the experience, given the atmosphere alone was enough, in my opinion, to get this vibe of terror. So, in summary, what would I give this movie in regards to a score, this documentary? I would give The Nightmare a 6.5 out of 10. The stories were in most cases compelling, very enjoyable. The interviewees did a great job portraying their experiences, and the atmosphere was creepy. However, the lack of the how and why in regards to any kind of scientific studies and the welcome addition of keeping the content streamlined that was presented would have been very apt and very good. So, I hope you've enjoyed this movie Time in 5. You can find me on Twitter at BrianHayes73. Until next week, do your heart some good and get scared.